You know, I talk a lot to middle school and high school kids, and there's a couple advantages to that in my mind. One is that I'm really busy when I'm doing it, so I usually have like 2 minutes to think of an idea, then I run out on stage and say it. And give me time, and I'm my own worst nightmare. And so I've prepared 200 speeches in the last week. And today's short time will be a schizophrenic attempt to pick whichever ones come out of my mouth. When I first started thinking about talking to grown-ups, and that's what I call all you folks, I started thinking, well, this is going to be different, because when you talk to middle school and high school kids, you're always talking, at least I'm always using words like dreams, hopes, joy, passion, working hard to find your passion, having courage, taking risks. And I thought, well, you know, these are really sort of emotionally laden words, and grown-ups know these words. And so I'm probably going to have to be talking to a more sophisticated audience and have to come up with some really clever things to say, things we haven't thought of. And then I started thinking about that most of my talks to kids are, in a way, trying to get them to think of not being grown-ups. And what I mean about that, and I'll give you an example. My own children, I have a 10-year-old and I have an 8-year-old. And they came out pretty perfect as far as we were concerned. They were super, super creative. They loved to dance, they loved to sing, they loved to draw, they loved to paint, they liked to imagine. And I think that's our very favorite thing about them, is their imaginations are huge. And when my wife and I think about our role as parents, in many ways, I feel like we're really just trying to save them from whatever grown-upness is. And of course, there's some really important lessons they're learning along the way that, like don't bite other people and learn to brush your teeth and that sort of thing. But one of the things that I say to my youngest daughter every single night before she goes to bed, unless I get home after her, which sometimes happens, is I say, Mina, remember, there's nobody in the entire world better at being Mina than you. And that's what you're best at. You are best at Mina no matter what. And I was thinking about why I tell her that. And the reason why I tell her that is because when I'm working with young people, that's what they lose sight of first, I think, is they start wondering about who they should be in the world in a sort of an external human being. What am I supposed to be doing, and how am I supposed to be doing it? And they begin to lose their imaginations, and they begin to lose their dreams. And as they do that, they become, I think, risk-adverse and scared of taking chances and scared of just being themselves. And so I thought, if I'm going to be talking about investing in hope, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the campus, I think it's important to go back and actually share with you what I try to share with my students. And I think it's inevitable in a way that if I'm talking to young people about sort of how to be when they become grown-ups, perhaps it's inevitable. And I'm saying, don't become grown-ups. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, please understand. But what I'm really, it seems inevitable that eventually I'd be talking to some grown-ups and trying to remind us of what I think are our most important characteristics. And with that in mind, I wanted to talk specifically about the campus, but I want to say just a little bit about myself. I've always been a really big dreamer. And an example is I used to float around in a little rubber boat in the ocean when I was little, and I would spend hours and hours doing this. And so much that people would come up to me in their boats and they'd be afraid that something was wrong with me, and they'd check in with me. And I've also always been a bit of a problem solver. And so somewhere along the way I realized that if I just left a fishing pole over the side and didn't put a hook on it, that people would stop checking in with me, and I'd be free to dream. And my life, I think, has been about, at least I've tried to make it following dreams. I just love following dreams. I love the way that dreams can just take you here, there, or everything. I think by the time I was 18, I had gone ahead and had every profession that I could imagine anyway, and I'd gone everywhere in the world, and that was just so amazing for me, that idea of where imagination can take you. And so when I think about following dreams, some dreams that I followed, one, for example, was I decided once I loved kayaking, and so I kayaked up the coast of Alaska from Vancouver to Sitka. And when I was doing that, I met someone else, and he shared his dream with me. He was a kayaker who had gotten old and landed somewhere along the coast and built himself a little cabin. And he said, if I were you, and I was your age, I'd paddle the east coast of Russia and paddle to Japan, because that's got to be an extraordinary place. I bet it'd be like Alaska 100 or 150 years ago, and even more wild and even more sort of raw and open. And that was an example of a dream or an idea transmitting to another person. And I took that dream and I pursued it. And it didn't really work out. And I think that that's the other part about dreams, is dreams a lot of times end in failure. But what's wonderful about failure is what so often happens in failure is you end up finding something else. And you realize that your dream really wasn't paddling to Japan. Your dream really was to have adventure. And in this case, I got stuck in Russia for about a month and a half, and a sailboat came along, and it picked me up. And I sailed then for a year. And I took a little break before I went on the second trip. They said, this was really fun, and how would you like to come sail with us again? We're going to plan a trip. And I said, that sounds great. And all my life, I had all read these adventure books about diving on shipwrecks, and I had read books about polar ice caps, and I always wanted to do all that. And so I got this fax then after being home for about 6 months, and it was 6 pages long, and it outlined that we were going to be sailing in this old wooden sailboat, and we were going to sail through the North Pacific and South Pacific, and we were going to climb mountains, and we were going to cross ice caps, and we were going to do all these things that I had dreamed of. So sometimes dreams come true, and I think that's way more interesting than the dreams that don't come true. And I think it's way better to put yourself in a situation where something might happen than protect yourself from the idea that something might not be successful. And I think that's the message we teach and try to share with our students at the Fine Arts Camp. And now let's roll towards today. In 2004, I was on this campus. I had an office, and things weren't going really well for the school. And it was hard to watch, but it was also intriguing. And this is the problem solver, the guy with the fishing pole. And I'm thinking, God, wouldn't that be just sort of fun to sort of have a crack at this thing and see what I could do? And then I just sort of put it away inside my head and let it go. And then it was really amazing how in 2007, I think, 2 years ago, in June, one of the trustees of the college said, how would you like to have a crack at trying to take on this campus and see what we could do with it? And that was an example, I think, of how you can put a dream in your head and not put a lot of energy into it, but if you just let it be there and percolate, that it might just happen and you might get that chance. And the chance that we had was to solve a problem. And the problem was, what do you do with 20 buildings, 20 acres, 50 years of deferred maintenance, and as the state experts described it, $50 million of deferred maintenance? And how do you turn it into something that could be a positive experience instead of a negative experience? And one of the things that I did is I worried a lot first, because I worry a lot just like anybody else, and probably even more. And I worried and I worried and I worried, and then I started thinking and thinking and thinking. I was working with a friend, and we did a big analysis for 3 months. We came up with version 14 of an Excel spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet was sort of this thing that was telling us what we needed to do. And eventually, as they say, it didn't pencil out. It just simply didn't pencil out. But the amazing thing is we thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? We could fail. And if we failed, is that everything that we are? No, it's just another problem to try to solve, so let's do it. And there was this great notion, let's just get the ball rolling and see what happens. And somewhere in this sort of existential crisis of should we do it or could we do it, I read a quote that one of our 14-year-old kids had written at the end of camp. And she said, at the Sitka Fine Arts Camp, I learned to take risks and try to do things that I didn't know for sure that I could succeed at. And it's amazing to me how often we can learn from the very lessons that we try to teach our young people, yet we don't always embrace them and live them ourselves. And so it was that quote that I had from her that sort of tipped me over the edge and then said, let's go for it. And then the amazing thing happened is without really much of a plan at all, and people kept saying, what's your business plan? I didn't know what to do with a business plan. How do you solve $50 million of deferred maintenance? The amazing thing is by just jumping in and trying to take on a dream, all these other people joined us. And I gave an example the other day when I was talking to our students about someone that went underneath a building for a month and didn't come up for another month. And one day I saw him. I mean, he'd just disappear and work on plumbing all day long. And he said, thank you so much at the end of the day. And he has this beatific smile on his face. And I'm thinking, this is really strange. This man is sitting here working on rotten pipes day in, day out for a month, and he's thanking me for this experience. And I said, well, this is crazy. Thank you. I can't believe you're doing this. And he said, no, thank you. And I said, for what? All I did was jump off a cliff. And he said, well, thank you for jumping off a cliff so we could all follow. And I think somewhere and somehow that says something about what the title of my talk was supposed to be, which is investing in hope. And that hope is this new capital, or perhaps it's an old capital that we've, just like as we forget to be children, we forget as adults to rely on, which is ultimately, it's people that solve problems. It's not money, and it's not business plans. And that if people all want to work together and come together, they can solve pretty much anything. And our kids believe that, and I think it's up to us as adults to live it for them. And that's it. Thank you.